So I'd need to hear the caveats on that too. All right, how long?
Yeah,
I
I'll stand it.
think what that podcast person was getting at was you'll eventually talk yourself out.
Hello, Bill. It's so nice to have you on my show today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for accepting my invitation. It's honestly an honor to be here with you. I love your work. I love what you've done for people in general. I think being a therapist is such a honorable career, very noble.
Yeah.
So, and I'm very happy to sit with you today and talk
Thank you.
about depression. Are you
Mm.
excited?
Yes.
So, depression is something, I think that word, that term is misused so much. I
Hmm.
mean, as soon as someone's feeling a little down,
Yeah.
loss of appetite or energy, immediately they'll fall into like, I had depression, I had depression. So, other than from what the DSM says what depression is,
Hmm.
I'd love to know what's your humanly perspective as a therapist,
Well,
what depression is.
yeah. So I I like the definition that depression is anger turned inwards.
Yes.
That one's very good. I mentioned that to somebody
Powerful.
yesterday. Yeah, in a group setting, they're like, "Oh, I never heard that before." Yeah, you're hating yourself about
Yeah.
something that happens. Another good one that I like is that we're living in the past.
Yeah.
So when we're depressed, we're worried about whatever it was 3 days ago. Why didn't I choose this way? Why didn't I choose that way? And then another one. Now that I do cognitive behavioral therapy, and CBT is going to want to look at the thoughts always.
Correct.
So frequently people think that they cannot change anything or everything's going to remain exactly the same for the rest of my life. I will always be stuck in this situation. No, that's not necessarily true. And we have to learn to let go of the past and move forward. There's physiological things that happen in the brain too. When we get very depressed or anxious, anxiety especially will flood the brain with cortisol, and then the brain shuts down. And fear of tests is a great one. You get so afraid of taking the test the day of, you can't remember anything that you studied because your brain, your hippocampus,
Right.
is saturated with cortisol. So there's some physiological things going on in the brain, but from a CBT, which we have to be aware of, but from a CBT perspective, it's the thoughts that we're thinking that are leading us to these conclusions and these feelings. And frequently it's going to be shoulds. We're shooting all over ourselves, as I say in Canada.
Yes.
Yes. So the rabbi said, you're shooting all over yourselves. So we want to change a should to prefer. So instead of saying you shouldn't do that
Mm,
or I should have chosen this, I want to say I would prefer.
mhm.
If my girlfriend flattens the credit card every time she goes to the store, and I say you shouldn't do that, I want to change it to I'd prefer if you didn't flatten the credit card.
Yeah.
And it softens
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
depression is somewhat living in the past, anger at yourself, and assuming that nothing's going to change and having some really negative thoughts that are just putting you into a funk. And then they can take on physiological manifestations. You don't feel like exercising. You don't feel like talking to anybody else, and it just creates a whole associated associations of complexities, to make it
That's
very
right.
difficult. So,
Do you think that, or have you kind of noticed this, that after COVID, um, depression just was on such a rise?
yeah, I think we even talked a little bit that my business
Right.
exploded during COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and we look at what happened. I mean, just walking down the street, people were staying 15 feet away. And that was the polite thing to do. Stay the hell away from everybody else. 15 to 6 to 15 feet. And consequently, everybody's in their bubble. They're not associating. And then they're home. And
Yeah.
Exponentially went up. So
Yeah.
absolutely, COVID did not help us. We learned a
No.
lot, but yeah, the depression went up.
I'll add to that yes, the social aspect of being so isolated and all of that definitely contributed. But I also have these thoughts of how here in America we're so used to working so much and not really having time to really reflect on our day, reflect on our week. I feel like as Americans, we are so used to working that thinking and feeling is not really permitted. It's not permitted.
Absolutely.
And so when COVID hit, I feel like people had so much time to really process years of work and years of family life that they were just overwhelmed with emotions. I mean, do you kind of agree with that, or
Totally.
what are your thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
and we weren't set up to deal with them. We don't.
Yes. We weren't taught.
We weren't taught. We weren't taught.
Yeah.
So we're sort of operating out of our. Yeah, we were not ready for COVID at all. It was just. Yeah, it was a mess, and we don't have the training. I think we've gotten a lot better. Therapy has certainly been promoted in the media. I'm not a fan of the media, but it has been promoted, and in general, and the stigma, a lot of the stigma, though not in every community, as you know, but a lot of the stigma is going away, and that's really good. It just helps sometimes to talk about it and not feel alone. You know, that's another one in depression is you feel like you're the only person in the world with that problem.
Yeah. Bill, do you think that depression is could be like hereditary, it's genetics, or it could be, so tell us a little bit about that.
So there's, I don't know that we've um, identified this per se, but there's one of the things that we'll ask on a intake assessment is, has anybody in your family been
Right.
diagnosed?
Family
And that
history,
means
yeah.
that we will have a predisposition to it. So if there's schizophrenia in the family, if there's depression in the family, I'm Irish Norwegian on my mother's side, and there was, the Norwegian. Some of it has to do with seasonal affective disorder, but the Norse have a history of some serious depression, and it absolutely is genetic and hereditary, and then the way you were raised, so yeah, I don't think the science is caught up to, oh, he's got the gene for depression, or
Yeah, because there's no research on that.
not
I know that
really.
there's never been any research, and Gabor Machias actually talked about this when I was at one of his seminars, that schizophrenia, yes, we have actual evidence, but there's no actual evidence that depression is, there's a predisposition of someone being depressed. There's
Yeah,
just no studies like that. So I would love to see
on the
studies like that.
genetic side. Now, there's a study. What do they call? I forget the name of the study. I think it was put out by Kaiser a long time ago, but it showed that traumas in the home. It's a 10-question assessment,
Mhm.
and it's a relatively common name, which I'm spacing on. But I did a little presentation on it for my master's program. But if you've got drugs, abuse, violence in the home,
Mhm.
so socially speaking, those are pre-indicators with a high degree of certainty, like an 85 to 90% certainty that, yeah, there was violence in your home, there was drug abuse, there was trauma, there was sexual abuse, there is a very good likelihood that you're going to develop
Experience.
mental health complications later in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something earlier, and I love that because I agree with that, that depression is anger turned inward. So not expressed emotions.
Right.
I'd like to talk about that a little bit because I think that there's definitely expressing yourself is such an essential part of being a human being, but there's certain people that really haven't learned how to express themselves,
Absolutely.
so they lock it in. So what are some ways you think that people can express their anger? What are some healthy anger expressions?
I love letters.
You do?
Oh, I love them. I think a letter to whoever you're angry with and writing
Yeah.
it longhand, old school script. But they don't teach that in the schools so much anymore. But
Yeah.
script was very good for it. But I prefer it over typing and a
So
letter.
writing, physically writing.
Physically
I
writing because
agree
I
with
think
that.
there's an
I agree.
organic thing from the brain to the
Okay.
hand and writing it out. And then what I have my clients do is burn the letter and douse it
Shamanistic, right?
yeah, very. My daughter said that's a spell. I go, that's a therapeutic intervention. What are you talking about? But yeah, use it very shamanistic. And you
Yeah.
could speak into it and say, I release you and toss it into the earth. And you've got earth, water, fire, and air. Um, my uh, Wiccan clients love that. And the crystals will go along with it too if it gets them well. But the act of burning the letter, expressing, we need to be heard. Um, in person, I love the Gestalt technique of the empty chair. I
Oh, that's my
love,
favorite. Yeah, it's
oh,
so good.
yeah, and
So good.
it's so weird, and people look at you and they're like, "I'm supposed to talk to the yeah, talk to the chair,"
It's
and they
supposed to
always wind
talk
up
to an empty
wanting to
chair.
talk to me. I say, "Don't tell me. Tell
Yeah,
Uncle Joe. He's in the chair, but he died 15. Yeah, I know. Tell him." And
yeah,
that act of expression is phenomenal, right?
it
And
is.
that's the release that you're talking about. So not being heard is awful. It's
Yeah,
I don't have any data or statistics to go into it, but I know it's a common theme, and that's one of the reasons why therapy works because you therapos, you get it out, and you speak to somebody who is understanding and listening and validating, and that's so crucial in today's world. But you're absolutely correct, is the expression of it, and not necessarily really to the person who caused the pain. So if your mother caused something and telling mom how you feel might really actually be counterproductive.
yeah,
But I'll have them do an empty chair in session with mom. Mom never heard it, but my client feels so much better having gotten it off their chest, having
that's
said
right.
that. So that expression, and sometimes it gets a little rough around the edges and they're yelling and crying, but that's actually better for the therapy. Just let it all out. So being heard is a very big thing.
Oh, 100%. And also all the physical dilemmas that come with keeping anger inside.
Mm,
I mean, the autoimmune disease rates are insane among women. Women have such, I mean, as women, I think, and I think it varies from culture to culture, but Indo-Europeans, Middle Easterns, I mean, we've been taught to not really be okay expressing
right.
ourselves because girls are not supposed to yell, girls are not supposed to scream, girls are not supposed to get angry. So you're taught this, and then all your life, anyone who has really triggered you, insulted you, disrespected you, you're just supposed to swallow all of that. And here you are at age 33 and you're experiencing like thyroid issues and you're like, what is this? What's going on? So the body talks.
Totally. So the classic book on that is I'm looking at it in my bookcase. The
Yeah.
Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van
Or
der Kolk. Yeah, just
yeah.
it's gold. It's heavy. It's
It
not
is heavy,
light
but it is gold.
reading,
It's a
but
heavy gold.
yeah, it's gold. And you can share, and a lot of lay people have shared, I read a book one time.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. So the physiological components of what happens from the depression or holding it in or not expressing yourself are extreme. Yeah, I agree. So I see that, and I'll do a general overview when I'm taking, doing an intake. How's your sleep? Do you have are you exercising? What's your, bring all those things up, and because those are tells, those are indicators of depression or real stress,
Yeah.
anxiety. Yeah.
One thing as I was talking to you, one thing that I remembered we talked about is this power over you, a certain person that has made you angry, that has power over you. And you had mentioned, what I like is changing that person's name in the phone. So if you have, and I love this intervention. Can we call it an
Yeah,
intervention?
no, it absolutely is.
It's so, oh my God, it's just so liberating, and it feels so nice. So, and I want to kind of bring this up to the audience, that if there's somebody who has ever triggered you, Bill's number one intervention is, if that person has a certain power over you, like let's just say a mom or a dad, and you have a really dysfunctional relationship with your parent, you change their name from mom to dad to their actual name.
Your actual first name. Yeah.
To
So
their first
to
name.
their
So
first
talk to us
name.
about that.
So I'm 64 years old, and if I say mommy, I'm 7. I feel it. I'm feeling it right now. I'm like, oh, and I've got
I
all the
say
things with
mommy,
the,
Bill. I
yeah.
still say mommy.
So I go right back. And what my clients will tell me is, I said, so you got a cell phone, you still communicating with mom or dad? Yeah. Okay, what are they on your phone? It says mom. So when the text shows up, it says mom or dad. I said, change it to Joe or Marie or whatever their name is. And Joe's calling again. Right.
Oh
Oh,
wow, yeah,
right.
that's
Denise is calling again. Okay, yeah, we'll deal, because it
yeah,
gives us distance, and it forces it, because the pet name of mom it's a nickname that, it's the kid sort of mouths it. That's like his first word is mama. It just kind of
yeah,
stumbles
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And when we say that, it's triggering impulses in the brain. It's running a program. So if you
Mhm.
don't want them living in your brain, if in your mind, change the name on the tenant uh, mailbox down below, and put their first name, and start to. You don't have to do it to them in person. You don't have to call
Yeah,
mom,
yeah,
Diane, or something. But
right.
it does help for the phone, and I'm glad you remembered that. Yeah, that's a
It's
good one.
so good.
Yeah, it really really works, and people love it. And if there's resistance, so therapeutically, if there's resistance, I'm like, okay, why don't you want to do it? What's going on?
Yeah.
You know,
That's and I love it so much, because it really does allow the person to really get their power back. And part of depression is feeling powerless,
oh,
right? That's where that,
I love that. Yeah,
just that hopelessness and
yeah,
that helplessness, it's a sense of powerless, like I'm powerless, I don't know what to do. But in reality, you're not powerless. You just have
right,
to kind of connect with your true power, your essence again.
absolutely.
And I
So
love
I've
that.
changed. Um, I love changing definitions. So definition of mom, change her to Marie or whatever.
Yeah.
But powerless. So if we say you are powerful, we have an impression of somebody with, big muscles, or somebody with a lot of
Mhm.
money or political power.
Mhm.
But in therapy, what I want us to do is change the definitions. The more options you have, the more
Yeah,
powerful you are.
that's right.
Right. So it's
Love
very,
it.
so one of the cognitive behavioral therapy thinking errors is all or nothing thinking, black or white, yes or no,
Mhm.
good or bad. But really, the world is shades of gray. And and you have options in each, eventuality. You can choose, and when you have ways to treat a problem, you're not painted in the corner or cornered.
Yeah.
And now you have gotten your power back because I have option A, I have option B, and I have option C. And that is very wonderful. So I love the ability. We don't have to respond the same way to everything.
Yeah.
You can choose, you can pick and choose. You don't have to go we don't go nuclear in war. We have graduated responses in the military. So
Yeah.
and those are effective in everyday life. So I
Yeah.
love that definition. Yeah.
Bill, what do you think about gratefulness and being grateful? I mean, so this is a lot of people, a lot of influencers, a lot of doctors, psychologists talk about this. But there's people that are just in such a deep, dark situation of
Mhm.
depression that it's difficult for them to reach for that gratefulness. Like, oh, just be grateful. You're at least able to get up. You're able to see. You're able
Yeah.
to breathe. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I
Because
love.
that's a
Yeah. So gratitude is a big one, and I know it's a
it
hot
is.
button for influencers and people like that. Um, when I would lead groups at a psychiatric hospital, I would talk about gratitude,
Yes.
and I remember I have high blood pressure, so I would have to go see my doctor every 3 months and get checked, and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to have to do this, and I got to show up work late, I got to pay time off, and I bitch and moan
Yeah.
and complain. And then I remembered telling the people in the group, the patients, let's have gratitude about things. I thought, well, why aren't you doing it, butthead? So
Wow, you were called
yeah,
out, huh?
I called myself out. And what I did was I started to say, at least I get to go see a doctor for high blood pressure.
Hmm.
Oh, so you're not going along, and in any subsequent one, you can start to look at the advantages. Yeah. Oh, it's a hassle. Oh, it's a hassle. You have to go to the doctor. At least you get to go to the doctor. And I don't like that. Well, it's a first world problem. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's having gratitude, and it changes. It'll If you start it right from the get-go, from when you wake up, it can change your day from the minute
Yeah.
your foot hits the floor. Yeah, I know. I see it on your face. So exactly. So I use it. I need to listen to it more often. I'm going to go query myself later in the day. Edith and I were talking about gratitude, where because we can always show more, and I found it to be extraordinarily effective. Instead of bitching about something,
Yeah.
complaining, whining. Okay, butthead. So this guy shows up. Okay, you show a little more gratitude. When he shows up, I have to change, and I usually.
See, that's what you just said. I have to be more and recognize and see. See, for me, that's the beginning of depression, is not seeing
What are you not seeing?
what you have, and you're constantly in what you don't have.
Ooh.
Why? What I don't have, what I didn't have, I could have had,
Mm-hmm.
why I did. So it's this constant complaining of bickering and just not really seeing what's in front of you. You're always seeing what happened and what could happen.
Yeah.
You're always going to why. It's just this constant complaint.
Yeah.
That for me, that's the beginning of, even if there's traumas in the picture. I mean, I don't know a single person that doesn't have trauma in their life. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't, you probably will, because it's part of life,
Yeah.
something happens, something comes up for everyone. But it's always this going back to why, this constant complaint. And that is the beginning of war.
Yeah. What I
War with
don't have.
yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why don't I have? I should have this. And
Why did this happen?
yeah, and if you look at, not to get all evangelical on us, but if you look at the way that Jesus fed the 5,000,
Yes, and we love that, by the way. We're
Yeah.
all about Jesus here.
Yeah.
My followers, all of us. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So,
he looked at, what was it? I think there's two different ones, but there's basically 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then he gave thanks for that. And when he
yeah,
gave thanks for what we do have, then it all multiplied. So there's your best gratitude miracle in the Bible,
yeah,
and that's the best. And even if we just going to metaphor it, all right, fine, use it as a metaphor for your life. What do you got? I got a car. Well, it's not the greatest car. We're not
but
keeping
it's a
up with the
car.
Kardashians. We're
Yeah. I see what you did there.
we're going to give joy for the what I do have, and when I do, and I express
Yeah.
that, I get out of the depression. I changed my point of
Oh,
view. I gave myself different opportunities to respond in different ways, and the war is not on anymore.
that's right.
Yeah, I like how you said war. It's the war.
Yeah, it is a war. It's a war with yourself. It's a war with your essentially, even if it's about the past, it's a war you have with yourself, which translates into exactly what the definition of the depression was: is
Yeah,
anger
turned
turned
inward.
inward, and it's this war, ongoing war with yourself.
I'm writing it down on
You are?
yeah, because it's really good. Ongoing war with yourself. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very useful.
Mhm.
And sometimes stuff does happen externally,
Mhm.
but what are we doing to control that
Yeah.
ongoing war with ourselves? And that's where the battle.
It is. It's a battle, and it's okay. It's okay for that battle to happen.
Mhm.
What's not okay is the ongoing part.
Yeah, we got to let this war go. We need a ceasefire. We need
Ceasefire.
yeah,
Yes. When
negotiate with that.
are you gonna cease fire? Yes, Bill. I love that.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and
good.
yeah, and we can change it with the gratitude. We can change it
Oh,
with recognizing that we have
yeah.
options, that we don't have to live a life a certain way. That's another one that'll show up. In cognitive behavior therapy, they'll talk about schemas. And a
Yeah.
schema is, where do I fit in the world? And, how does the world respond to me? And it's sort of, I
Mhm.
got Carl Jung behind me, but um,
My guy.
yeah, yeah. So Jung would call them complexes, but it's, bad things always happen to Bill. Oh, okay. Why is that? Well, I was born, and that's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
the
yeah.
narrative, uh, tell a different story. I like
Yeah.
narrative therapy. I'm not an
I do
expert
too.
in it, but I like that storytelling aspect because it gets at the schemas.
Mhm.
And I'm writing another note. I'm getting all kinds of narrative.
See,
Um,
we should do more podcasts.
we
Isn't
should. It's
it
good.
amazing? It's
It's
like a
good.
world of knowledge, like
Yeah,
two brains just trying to process together. That's just such a. I'm grateful.
I am too. I'm grateful we did this today. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of clients as it's going along. I'm thinking of myself as this is going along.
Yeah.
So I try not to be one of those therapists that's pointing. But when I tell people, I say I've got 3 fingers pointing back at me. So if I am pointing, believe me, sinner number one right here. So,
Yeah, you want to take this finger and just go like that, and just be like,
yeah,
okay, well, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I don't know why I'm so. I think that to be, I'm going to use the word obsessed because I don't have, for the lack of a better word, let's just say, I have this obsession with gratefulness. And until a person genuinely, you know how you said you put your feet down and you were grateful? It's really hard to teach a client what gratefulness is until they genuinely experience it themselves.
yeah,
It's a completely different world, it's a different feeling. And I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it because it really does change all the
it
chemicals
does.
within you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's this unexplainable feeling of, and I think that the more often you're grateful for the little things
yeah,
even, it just naturally, like God flows in you. It's just in you.
Yeah.
You'll be sitting down or driving. I don't know if you've experienced this, and you just get a hit of this gratitude, and you're like, God, I'm just so grateful. I bought myself, let's just say, I don't know, a pair of, shoes
Right.
or a coffee, or I'm breathing. It's more natural.
It's wonderful. That's also childlike, which in a
Yeah.
good way, in the most positive sense of the word.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy. And when we can do that, you're going to get those chemicals going, and it's a
Yeah.
wonderful place to be. That we're not experts at misery.
Yeah. Exactly. So, would you say, as a licensed therapist, someone who's been doing this for a long time, right? Would you say, I'm saying this, but I want to know what your perspective, because you're just so well seasoned. Would you say that um, gratitude can possibly be the best intervention for someone who has depression?
It depends on the person.
You think it depends on person by person,
Yeah.
person to person?
Yeah. Yeah. There are different reasons why.
People are
I've come across some really bad examples of,
depression.
yeah. So I had a client who a truck had jumped the divider and killed his whole family, his two kids and his wife, while he was driving the car. And there ain't no gratitude that's going to fix that.
Yeah.
There really wasn't much I could say to him either. I just sat
Oh my
with him.
goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that's an extreme example. I do like to change the thinking. I add gratitude liberally as seasoning in the stew. So if we're making a stew to get you out of depression, get a person out of depression, I'm going to want to add gratitude.
Do you think that that person, I mean, obviously he's your client, but do you feel like there was more anger versus depression?
Oh, for that gentleman,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that he
Because
was.
that's horrible. I have a similar story like that.
Yeah, it was at a psychiatric hospital. He was on a 5150, so he had thought of killing himself, and
Yeah.
that got him a 3-day trip. And there was really nothing I could tell him, but he had the whole range of emotions: survivor's guilt, why me? If I had just seen,
Yeah. And that's
he
real.
was going through all of that. So there really wasn't much, but that way I cherry picked a really harsh example. Generally speaking, though, I think gratitude is a major thing that I want people to avail themselves of, because then you're taking stock of your assets. You're taking stock of what you have, not what you don't have. And our culture in the West is so predicated on what you don't have.
Hmm.
That's what Madison Avenue does with advertising. That's what television does with status.
Schools too, Bill. Schools too.
Yeah, 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 what you don't have. So I'd rather take stock of what I do have and be grateful for it, and I cherish it and I treat it well, treat it with respect. So I paraphrase the Apostle Paul. Gratitude covers a multitude of sins. So if you got gratitude, that's a great first step to turning everything around. I don't know it's the only one, but sometimes people are stuck with stinking thinking, but gratitude goes a long way to help that. So it's much more of a recipe per person. For me, from my experience as a therapist, it's okay. What do we want to bring to this? I want to listen. what what's our, why am I talking to you today? This is what I don't usually say that, but I go, so what's going on? Did you want therapy? And then I have an idea. What would you like to talk about today? Sometimes they lead me in a offshoot direction, but most of the time it's the stuff that's coming up, and that they're being hit with, and then we want to address, okay, is it always going to be like that? Can you express gratitude? You know are you shooting all over yourself? Are you
Yeah.
catastrophizing? Is it black and white thinking? Are you labeling? And if I can use those, then they open the door to the subconscious, and then we get into their narrative. Well, it's always been bad ever since I was little.
Yeah.
Now we get the story. So
I was, my gosh, which I forgot the name. There was this podcast I was watching, and there was a lady speaking about anger, and she was talking about, well, the correlation with anger and depression, but how it just makes you into this bitter and really personality wise just unattractive person. It's not a person that you don't want to be around. It's just
right.
constantly just sad, complaining, and and so, and it was really interesting how she was talking about, if you are depressed and just angry, never stop talking about your anger. Never stop sharing, never stop expressing your anger. What are your thoughts about that?
To whom? Never stop.
In general, like, just don't stop talking. If you're angry, just don't hold it in. Just talk about your anger. And there wasn't a clarification as to who, but it was really interesting. I'm like, okay, so does this person have the green card to just, I mean, it's kind of like it's the same thing, right? She's going to go back, or he's going to go back and do the same thing over and over and
Over and
be
over again,
a complainer again,
and they're a one note Johnny, and you're always complaining, and people will stop. So I need to hear the caveats on that too. All right, how long?
yeah,
I
I'll stand it
think
up.
what that podcast person was getting at was you'll eventually talk yourself out.
Yeah, that's what I was
They
processing
never
too, but
met my mother-in-law from Brooklyn. I'm just kidding. I don't have a mother-in-law from Brooklyn, but you know what I mean.
no.
We all know somebody that never stops with the kvetching, as they say in
That's
the
right.
Jewish community, and um, that's no fun to be around. But I do agree. Well, which is why I like those interventions of the empty chair, or I'd like to get an exclamation point on the sentence. And then if it shows up the next day, then we can do another sentence with a new exclamation point. The exclamation point would be burning the letter, talking to the empty chair. Get it out. I agree, but I don't know about never stop talking about it. Well,
Yeah,
that's going to be rough to be around, and you're going to lose a lot of friends. We
100%.
all know people like that. So I do agree to talk about it. Journaling. One of my favorite things is the journal becomes, I'm looking for mine. I think I left it over there. The journal is it's the book of what happened to you. And the journal wants to hear. I always write in that, I've been writing, and I've only been a therapist 13 years, but I've been journaling about 25 or 30, and I just love it. But it's the book of what's going on with you, and so I would definitely write about it in the journal, and get it out. I'd use that as another modality.
Tell us about this intervention that you have about writing with your left and then translating it with your right. I love this, you guys. I
Yeah.
want you guys to also listen to this. If anyone here is struggling with depression or any type of unresolved issues, is it? So
Mm-hmm.
this is a really beautiful intervention that I learned from Bill. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I stole this from a guy named John Bradshaw. And Bradshaw's written two very famous books, The Shame That Binds Us and Homecoming. And I read about this in Homecoming, and I've used it repeatedly. So Bradshaw quotes Eric Erickson. And Eric Erickson did a thing called stage theory. And he said, whatever age we are, that we have a conflict that doesn't get resolved, a part of us tends to stay that age until it does get resolved. So if you had a conflict with dad at 5, and it didn't get resolved, and you feel that you were treated unfairly, that becomes a trauma of sorts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bradshaw technique, I believe it's Bradshaw's take. I learned it from him. He's passed away now, but it was brilliant. But with your dominant hand, write a letter of love and support to the child. Now, he actually, what he
Your
actually,
inner child,
yeah, to the
right?
inner child, right. So what he actually has you do before that, if you read the book, he has you write down the whole circumstances of the
Yeah.
situation. But the second step in it is write a letter of love and support as though you are the parent you didn't have.
Yeah.
And you can sign it as mom or dad. You can, right? Now, it does get confusing when you're teaching somebody this. They're, because like, am I mom or dad? No. Imagine you want to become the parent that you did not have. So you want to write a letter of love and support with your dominant hand to the inner child, the 5-year-old or the 7-year-old or the 12-year-old that had a
Yeah.
conflict that didn't get resolved. And he needed or she needed a really understanding parent and not necessarily what they got in life. The child then, all right, so we do that. And the other thing about the letter is no fortune telling. No, you got to tough it out and be strong.
Right,
And
right.
this is going to happen when you're 17. Nothing like by Microsoft at 36 or anything like that. And then with the opposite hand, the child writes back to you.
Yeah. Your
All
less
right.
dominant hand.
The less dominant hand. And the reason that we do that is that it accesses different parts of the brain. And what will happen is memories come up. Maybe totally unrelated or something
That's
that you totally
fascinating.
forgot. Yeah, something you totally forgot about. So it's going to be physically challenging to write with I'm right-handed. So for me to write with my left, it's physically challenging. It's also going to be, almost unintelligible. So just as a matter of logistics, you want to translate it in the column immediately. As soon as you write it,
Yeah.
because when you go to read it in a week, you're going to be, I have no idea what I wrote.
Yeah.
Okay. So
That
you
makes
write a
sense.
letter of love and support with the dominant hand, and then the child writes back with the opposite hand. The best thing is if the two of you start conversing. The child, when I first read, I was a business guy. I liked psychology, so I'd read about it on the weekends, and I thought it was all psychobabble bullshit about the child. Until I became a therapist and I recognized that it is the trauma from
Yes.
our lives that followed us in life. Okay.
Bleeding into our lives. Yes.
Bleeding into our lives. And so when you have a memory, so the brain is very much like a computer. I'm pointing at my monitor, my computer. So the computer has X and Y coordinates and data bits. Well, in the brain, we have neurons which form memories. So these neurons, and when they fire in a certain way. So when you're starting to write with the opposite hand, you're still accessing those neurons, but you're sort of coming at it from another angle. And you're actually you're rewiring yourself. So you're creating a new neuron path. You're rewiring the trauma.
It's kind of like changing a narrative.
Totally. And you're doing it with love. So say, dad got on my case and he hit me with a belt when I was 5 and my mother said, good for you. And then I was, and I was actually not, I was wronged and I've held it to this day. So when I go back and I say, dear Billy, I love you. I have your back. I care about you. Signed, Dad. And then I write back, dear Dad, it was terrible. I'm so sad. But what we've done is we've rewired the memory and the way that we access it, and then we start to we take some of the charge away of the trauma, and we come up with new narratives, new ways of looking at it, and we're actually, I believe, accessing that memory. The way that I liken it is previously we were going in the front door, but there were a bunch of burglars in there waiting to hit us with a baseball bat. So, hey, kid, we're going to go in the side. We're going to go in through the second story window. We're going to go into the garage. We're going in the back door. We're not going in the front door. And when we do that, we're still getting inside the house, but we're not going in where we're getting attacked, and we can come up with different interpretations. Even just seeing, neurolinguistic programming does this too. Even just seeing an event as though you're an outside person will change the feelings. So if you have a trauma, you probably remember it in the first person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything. So even if I just get behind the wheel of my car and I had a bad accident, every time I get behind the wheel of the car, I'm remembering the accident, which is PTSD. Okay. And I cannot drive because it might happen again. But if I take you and imagine that we're standing on the street corner watching you get in an accident, I've now taken you out of the accident, and I'm
Yeah.
still accessing the memory, but I'm seeing it from across the street. And
Mm-hmm.
I've developed a new neural pathway. Right. So, Marine Corps, I was a Marines. I was a Marines for 12 years. So, my drill instructor yelling at me, and I could see his tonsils down, and I remember it in the first person, But if I imagine that I'm standing on the side of the squad bay in the shadows watching Private Leavitt get yelled at by Staff Sergeant Eddie Miller, right? And but I see it differently and I
Yeah.
relate to the event differently and it loses some of its mojo. So
Yeah. Yes.
I use this. So it's a Bradshaw technique. I found, I don't remember I'll send you the page numbers. I asked ChatGPT about it and I printed up something which I give clients. I'll send it to you. And
I love that.
and it's just so useful. Give me something that I can give to my clients. And when we do it, we can create our own healing, which is, I think that's really something that you want to, get at.
Yeah, and I think I essentially that's this is the obviously social media, TikTok, Instagram, podcasts, they should not be replaced for actual therapy. It's
Right.
just kind of like an example of what maybe healing would look like, but it's not. I want to make that clear. But also there's people who really genuinely can't afford it. They can't.
Yeah.
They don't have insurance and they can't afford it. So that's why there's people like me who have these platforms for them to kind of learn. So this is why I really like it when you say your own healing, is that this is something possibly, I mean, it's a safe thing to do at home. Would you think so?
I
It's
do.
it's
I do. Depending on the
journaling,
level of the trauma.
the level of the trauma. Yeah, I agree. I was
Yeah.
gonna that was my next question. That do you feel like this intervention would be appropriate for someone who's angry at someone, resentful towards
Absolutely.
someone who's caused them pain, harm, and they're angry, and to kind of write this out at
Absolutely.
home would be,
Yep.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's okay to do that. It's probably because we're on the air. If you've got an egregious problem, it's probably best to be with
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Depending on the level. Depending on the
depending on the level. But for just healing yourself and getting rid of judgments of yourself,
level.
we judge ourselves because of the way that our parents respond, Joe or Carol, on
Yeah.
the text, right? And what we want to do is put ourselves into that spot of being our own parent. So one of the
Be the
ways,
parent you didn't have, right?
yeah, the prototypes failed us. My parents fail me. I fail my kids. That's great. And I told my kids, I said, whose voice do you hear in your head criticizing you? We hear yours. Okay, you have,
Really, Bill?
yeah, sure.
But I love how you are so comfortable admitting that. I think that just, well, not a lot of parents can, especially a man, admitting that.
Well, I'm not perfect. We had one perfect guy 2,000 years ago. We nailed him to a tree. We didn't like him. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's just, and that's why we fail, is that we project our own BS onto our kids. And of course, they're going to go through their own stuff and only hear what they want. So, when I say fail, I have great relationships with the three of them to this day, and they're 38, 39, 40. So they come back because I'm saying, look, if you hear me in your head, you have my permission to tell me to go screw off.
Shut the hell up, huh?
Go for it. And they laugh, and then the guy's whose voice I hear told me I could tell him, so once we do that, then it does create an openness, and then we can change, well, here's what I was trying to get at. The parent thinks why didn't you get an A? And the kid hears, no matter how good I do, I'm a failure. And that's all or nothing thinking. Then they feel whatever I do isn't good enough. So that's the kind of things that I get.
That's the birth of an overachiever.
Yeah. But at what cost? Very, very driven people. I mean, Steve Jobs did incredible things. And the world is different for us having known him. He was a miserable human being.
Yeah.
And do we want that legacy? I mean, he had $6 billion, but so I don't know.
Do you think depression is curable?
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah. You have to want to be cured. Some people don't want it. Some people
I have a theory about that, by the way.
Please share.
And it's going to sound harsh, but it is just my opinion of it, that the people who are fully conscious that they need to heal and are not, the I don't want to, are the people who really love the victim chair because it serves them so good. It's just so good. Strong people are very lonely people, Bill.
Yes.
Because we don't have people running out, and I'm going to consider myself as one because I worked. I have enough work to kind of label myself as that. But I feel like the strong people are lonely because we don't have a lot of people chasing us, asking us how we are. Are you okay? Yeah. I mean, do you go and ask a confident, strong person how they are? Usually, very rare. People tend to ask the weaker people of how they are. Are you okay? How are you doing? So the people who don't want change, know that they need change, but they don't want change, are the people who love to be in that chair because it's full of attention, I think.
Yes. No, without a doubt. And that's
so good.
Yeah, well, that's one of my other favorite authors is Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
Stock market is closing.
It's okay. I love that book, by the way. I had my son read that book.
Yeah. But Frankl came up with the idea that we have the responsibility, the ability, and I got this from Stephen Covey, who was quoting Viktor Frankl, and he said we have response, and he put a dash and then ability, the ability to respond, and that is what allowed Frankl to survive Auschwitz, right? Is this premise that hey, Mr. Nazi dirtbag, you may have more liberty, you get to go home to mom at night, but I have more freedom even though I'm a prisoner in Auschwitz because I can choose how I'm going to respond to you. Ooh, ouch, ouch. And that's what, so, once
7-0.
Once you start dealing with these kind of people, you're reading Viktor Frankl and John Brazzer, you park your ego at the door. That's where I get with this. I just like, whoo. So, yeah, we have the ability
choose to respond. You're not a hostage to a reaction,
hostage to the past.
Yeah.
Or prisoner by the future, right? Yeah. So you're sitting there with two guns at your head and you can choose how you're going to respond, but boy, that'll infuriate some people. And I agree with you totally. There are some people that just love the victim because they get I think Covey was even talking about in the I think it was in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talked about a lady they had a shot to cure the grandmother. And we got the hypodermic here. I don't think they really had it, but they offered it to the grandma. We can give you this shot and we will get rid of the illness that is plaguing you. And she wouldn't take the shot because the whole family was catering to her.
Yeah.
Oh, grandma, are you okay?
I'm telling you, that's a dangerous place to be. And it's a dangerous person to be around.
I know. Another quick story. So there's a stock market book called Market Wizards written by a guy named Jack Schwager. And Schwager, what was the guy's name? He was Ed Seykota. He was interviewing a brilliant trader named Ed Seykota. And Seykota was talking about a guy who he traded with that would take $5,000 in the 70s and run it up to $250,000 in 6 months. This guy was brilliant. And then he'd lose it all back down to the 5,000. And then he'd slowly build it up again to 250 and go down. And Seykota said, I went through about 2 of these cycles with this guy. And then I recognized what he was doing. He's brilliant. I mean, even in today's dollars, 250 grand is pretty good. But he loved the sympathy that he got from his family for his market losses more than he loved the money. Ouch! Oh, sorry. So one of the things, this is deep psychology. What programs are we running that are causing these outcomes in our lives? Now, not everybody is ready to receive that question, right? But I usually, so I'll put my glasses on the end of my nose and say, okay, so what are you doing to bring this?
Are you that straight out? You have to. You're straight out in your sessions like that though, right? Like, are you for real, man?
Well, my therapist, it's always because your whole demeanor changes when this guy shows up. Hey, you got a problem.
You actually.
So when I look in the mirror, that I call him the witness. So that's the witness. But
that's insane. That's insane.
We're running programs and patterns in our lives that are causing us to stay. If you're not, I mean, sometimes meteors hit the earth, okay? Sometimes your car gets hit. Sometimes stuff happens. I get it. But for majority of the time, we're responsible for what's going on with us. So if you don't like your life, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right? That's a hard question, right?
That is,
and I don't do that with just everybody, but if somebody's been doing a lot of work, right? If they're doing a lot of work and I go, okay, you ready? You ready? What are you doing to cause this? Why are you attracting these people in your life?
Right. But also this question comes to my mind. Do you think it's fair to say that we are responsible for our mental health? Because look, Victor was in Auschwitz, right? And the situation that he was in, he said, you're a prisoner, I'm free because I choose how I'm going to respond. That's ultimate freedom right there. So I'm going to switch this up a little bit and say that do you think from a professional perspective that we are responsible for our mental health? Meaning,
absolutely.
Okay.
When you say responsible, meaning what is responsible?
Responsible as in, okay, someone has done horrible things to you and has caused you tremendous trauma, or, there's the Armenian genocide or whatever traumas that people endure in their life. At the end, we are responsible of how we're going to take that and play that out in our life, whether that's going to put us in a depression state, whether that's going to put us in anxiety, whether that's going to, whatever position, whatever mental health dilemmas that we experience from outside sources. Because if we're on our, I mean, like, look, Gabor talks about this, right? Like, we're perfectly perfect, but we're impacted by other people, our mental health dilemmas. I mean, people don't just sit down and say, hey, I have a great life and I have so much anxiety. No, it's
Right.
stemming from something.
Yeah.
It's coming up from, it's coming from an outside source. So if we had the knowledge
Right.
and the wisdom to switch that mindset, would there be mental health dilemmas with people? Does that make sense? Do I make
Well,
sense?
there will always be, because yes, you did. There will always be, because we are humans and we're all at different, we're fallible and we fail. But
But
we ultimately
can
do
choose
have
how to respond to these
responsibility.
things, right?
Yeah. And so I worked with clients that had schizophrenia, and they, in some sense, didn't have a choice in it because their, delusions
Oh, yeah.
overwhelmed them.
The
Right.
people that,
But, but they can choose to stay on the meds.
yeah,
Right. And I would look at them like this and say, so are you going to stay on your meds, or what are you doing? Right.
that's
And
right.
I don't need those meds. No, you do. You really do. And my clients that had long-term schizophrenia, which they were disabled, etc., but the ones that stayed on their meds, that chose
Yeah, yeah,
to stay with the
yeah,
meds,
yeah.
uh, were able to function and lead reasonably productive lives. And so I agree with you. Not everybody is going to be able to accept that, though. All right.
No,
So I would really need to vet my client and my patient and whoever I'm talking to, and their level of maturity and their level of readiness to accept it. I really
that's the
need to know
messed
who
up
I'm
part
talking
for
to.
me. That what this is the I understand that I'm able to empathize and sympathize. You right. I have the educational background as well to do so. However, it as a human being, I'm talking. It's difficult to grasp this idea that not a lot of people are willing to take responsibility and heal themselves.
I agree. I agree. And
Because
that
they're
gets
they're
at the
aware of
narrative.
it. They're aware
I
of
and
it.
so I proceed very cautiously when I share that, because it will infuriate people.
I know.
People hold on to their traumas because that's and it becomes sacred. You know,
Sometimes it's the only
how
thing they have to
dare
hold
you
on
talk
to,
about
right?
what? Yeah, yeah, and their sense of identity is tied up in it. So the grandmother wouldn't get the shot, the victims,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Now, stuff does happen. My clients did have schizophrenia, but if they choose to stay with their meds, they can get different outcomes in their lives. They don't have to be wandering the streets, with
Yeah.
lightsabers, killing mind control, and that's what I've seen. But that's a thing of responsibility. I agree. Not everybody's ready to
No.
accept it.
And there was this spiritual guide I was watching. I'll try to link his information when I have it. But there was a woman who came up and she's like, I have this tendency. And he's like, what? And she's like, well, I have this tendency to, and he's like, what? What do you have? And she's like, a tendency. And he's like, you're consciously making that decision because you're aware of the tendency. As soon as you are aware that it's a tendency, it's a habit, then you are conscious and you know what you're doing. And that was very powerful to me because most people do know, and most people are aware of the things that they're doing, but they're just not taking responsibility to heal or change something. So the people that don't is completely understandable, because there are people with severe mental illnesses, and that's super, I mean,
Right.
understandable. But the people that consciously know and are not changing, those people, man, I don't know. It's a tough one.
So there's a couple of different there's levels of consciousness too, though. Okay. I would say most people don't know. I may be wrong, but I don't think they're going, you know what, I'm creating all of the effects in my life. That to me, that's a high level
Yeah.
of personal growth, development, discipline, maturity, you know.
Of course.
Yes, stuff does happen. But
Uh-oh.
yeah, but what I see is people have the conscious mind, and then there's the undercurrent underneath the surface, very much like a river with frozen ice on the top, and then underneath the current is running at 60. There you go. I lost you for a second. So
Yeah, I know. I didn't have I don't know what happened.
yeah, you froze on one side. It's okay. We'll talk. So I'm not sure if but there's a couple of levels of consciousness at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it's very much like a frozen river, and that's where everybody's kind of operating under. But underneath is a 60-mile-an-hour current. And I don't think most people are aware of that. And that's which is why I like Jung. Jung was so into the subconscious. He called it the unconscious. But CBT
Yeah.
will open that up, right? And what are you thinking? What's the narrative? I love those because they indicate the story, and then it gets at, okay, this is this is what's coming out of me. But it's a high level of maturity to
Yeah.
get to that thing you were talking about. I don't think most people are ready for it. And certainly our
Yeah.
culture is one of all, depending on what part of the country you're in.
Yeah.
I don't want to get all political or anything, but, there's a victimization thing that's going on. And
Yeah.
then there's a personal responsibility thing. And, um,
Yeah.
where do we choose to, boy, that this is a hot button issue. It's like religion and politics, right?
It
You're gonna really
is.
hit it.
It
I
is.
agree with you. I agree with you, but I tread very carefully if I'm sharing that with a client. So I know it's a
Yeah.
podcast,
Yeah.
so
I
there
understand.
might be people on the other side going, "Oh my God, what did he say?" But if you're in therapy with me, I won't normally just share that in the first session. I'll wait and see, and I'll throw. Well, how much
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you
Well,
own
some
of it?
people won't take it well. It's understandable, and it might
Oh,
hurt someone also. So when we don't want
yeah, so we'll work with them where they're at. And but I agree with you in principle. It's extremely, as the Christians would say, it's extremely convicting.
to. Yeah.
So as you brought that up, I was like, boy, I was looking in the mirror at myself. I said, boy, so you could really, yeah, yeah, you got to own all that stuff,
When
So
I
gratitude,
was
and yeah,
it's when I was doing my practicum hours in during therapy school, I did my practicum hours at BHC Alhambra Hospital. I'm sure you know that hospital. So,
eight
you did
years I worked.
you did? How funny, me too. I
Yeah.
was a therapist at the eating disorder unit for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Inpatient, yeah. So I always say I became a therapist there because school didn't
Oh,
teach so much, the field teaches you how to be a therapist. But
totally.
my supervisor was such a tough cookie. She was a clinical psychologist, and she was a supervisor of the eating disorder unit, and I was getting my hours with her as well. Fascinating therapist, fascinating clinician, and the way I watched her conduct her group, because I would lead group sessions and there would be 25 to 30. I mean, you've done groups, so you know how
Right.
it works. Pretty intense. And here you are, a new therapist leading a group, and she would just rip me apart, Bill. You didn't do this, you didn't do this, you did. And the way I saw her, and I understand not every therapist is like this. Therapists are taught to be
Mm-hmm.
more soft and validating and understanding, which is
Right.
beautiful, but she wasn't like that. She was just laying on you, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you did wrong. And so I kind of saw the spark in people when she did that. It really woke them up. Now, again, yeah, it's not going to work with everyone, but I kind of like learned that from her. And I'm just like, wow, like this is pretty powerful when you do tell your client the truth of what's really happening.
Yeah.
It's really life altering. But I also agree with you on that aspect too, that not a lot of people are ready to hear that.
No.
And it's
So
not fair to
I
do that.
do like to tell them where I'm going treatment wise and say this is
Yeah.
where I'm going because I don't want it to be,
Yeah.
surprise,
Yeah.
savings and
Yeah. Surprise. This is what you're
I,
screwing up,
yeah, surprise.
Understandable.
But I agree with you. Yeah. I didn't know you were at BHC too.
Yeah, I was there. I finished my school, and my professor, who she was my professor as well, she's like, Edita, I think you're great. I think you'll make a great therapist. I want you to come to BHC. And everybody was trying to get it because it was a competitive. It's a tiny hospital, and you have schools like thing too. What are they called? The International University. I know you know this one. There's one in Orange County.
USIU?
Mm-mm,
Yeah, I
no.
know what there's US International. Yeah.
Alliant.
Alliant, yes.
Yeah, and their psychology program is great. So a lot of students from Alliant International were trying to do their practicum hours there, and I was like, yes, I scored something so close to home. This is amazing. But I learned how to be a therapist at BHC. I mean, that was an
Totally.
intense hospital. Intense.
So yeah, so I my instructor was also the clinical director on the
Really?
inpatient side. And yeah, and she got me the job in there, and she said if you work in a hospital or a prison, you
Yeah,
will cut your teeth and you will become expert and you'll be able to handle anything. And we saw it. We
that's right.
saw. Yeah, so yeah, so 4 years inpatient, 4 years outpatient at BHC. So
That
it
is
was
amazing. We worked at the same hospital. But yeah,
yeah,
anytime I have somebody come up and say, where did you go to school? Do you recommend this field? I always say yes, absolutely, because it's one of the most noble careers anyone can have.
yeah, yeah.
But it is, right? But also practicum needs to be in a hospital. That's my opinion. I think I love
I love
private
that. Yeah.
practice, but practicum, you got to swim in the dirty water first. It's not all about
Boy, and that
sipping
was
coffee on a
yeah.
beautiful chair and no, you got to
No,
get
yeah, I totally agree. It's a PhD all in itself. So
yeah.
it's real world and eating disorders are the toughest.
Bill,
That's the hardest. I've worked with all of them, and I
Bill,
had eating disorder. Dr. McNeil liked me, so he was the psychiatrist, and
Dr.
he said, you know what,
McNeil.
yeah. I'm going to leverage you. So he would give me
He's
sometimes a
awesome.
couple that would, yeah. But boy, they were tough because I do a lot with humor, and they did not. I thought
No.
this was a process group. You know, you know, I'm
Yeah.
trying to tell a joke and make everybody laugh, and a 20, with people that have slit their wrists or their throat,
Yes.
and
Ooh.
yeah, and the eating disorder was tough because it was all about control, and they were trying to control from, they're controlling the food, they're controlling.
And while you're eating
So
with
it was very, very interesting. So I learned a lot,
very interesting.
and
I'm very grateful that
yeah,
I had that experience, honestly. It
yeah,
was
it was
the
phenomenal.
toughest years of my life, but I will never, ever regret the years in
Oh, good.
school and the years in practicum. Blessing.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you. Thank you so
You're
much for
welcome. It was
today.
a
This was so good.
pleasure.
I appreciate you. And I love your work, and you've read so many books. My God, you're just like a wealth of knowledge. You are. Take a compliment.
Yes, ma'am, I will. I am responsible.
You did. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you.